sound, every sensation, even every thought. If it's just that, then what? What happens? And I mean, Dogen famously called this body and mind fallen away. And he was confirmed by his teacher, Ru Jing, fallen away, body and mind. I mean, that's just key click. And somehow in that unguarded moment of really, well, one sutra says absorbing world sounds. That's a little poetic, but a good pointer. It's this moment when somehow what you'd say is you disappear. There's a vanishing. And if we break it down a little, you could say, well, that separate sense of self just dissolves, melts away. It's suddenly totally, you could say seen through, but there's no one seeing that. It's just, suddenly not there and suddenly never was there. And out of that come this utter upwelling of compassion, tears. So also there was for me a beautiful moment in that looking up and suddenly, it just suddenly I realized this is audible in this zazen moment, in this great silence. And on the screen, I saw one person, it's just across the top, this beautiful view. I'm, of course, not really taking it in, but in that moment, like the key click, suddenly there was this image of someone sitting in zazen, just utterly in zazen, and then sort of looking at the computer aside, just, that looking was exactly at how beautiful this is in a way, funny. I mean, I think if we could really see this world, we'd be laughing, even in the midst of it all, really. That is, if any of this is the slightest bit dismissive, it's not the real deal. It's blind, but not true blindness. It's just this wonderful world that is pouring itself out all the time. And we don't, they're really not knowing. Really without a speck of knowing. So when we say, come home, that's a good phrase because it's so fitting and recognizable, these moments when we really come home, when we find ourselves totally at home. And yet there's, you'd have to say no one home. It's so free. It's so free. Uh, you know, and uh, I also want to say that this practice, you can sit your whole life and never have that sort of total experience. Uh, maybe what I'm talking about seems pie in the sky, or how did Henry once said, the fairy tale is true. You know, it might seem like a fairy tale, but just to sit, just to practice as we are, um, is to fully participate in all of this and offer yourself. It's such a beautiful thing to be willing just as you are. And maybe it's just really struggling to be still. And maybe, you know, even counting to 10 might be uh, a tall order. It's fine. Just to be, in a sense, taken in by this practice, but also offer yourself. So there's a hand in handness to that. And, you know, it really, you have to say there's nothing outside this. So it's not, it sounds like the 10 ox herding pictures, you know, which of course we grow and there are stages. Uh, and the horizon's always moving. I mean, there's always more. But on the other hand, you know, I keep coming back to our wonderful Master Dogen, 13th century, who this falling away experience. Um, and then coming back from China to Japan and being, you know, the most prolific. I mean, he just wrote and taught and only lived by Asian counting 53 years. That's from conception. Uh, gave us all of this, but he, you know, started his practice. And his first essay, the fantastic, rich, you know, in some ways really accessible to us, even though the translations, you know, are not, you know, there's a lot of gap. Still, he's giving these universal recommendations on zazen, his instructions to his monks. And in that very first essay, he writes practice and awakening as two words. Practice, realization, enlightenment, awakening. Uh, I, I like awakening because it's happening. It's not something that happened. It's this. So he writes those as two words, and then I don't know, some years later, he circles back and edits that essay ever so slightly. And one of the notable changes is writing practice awakening with a, as though if it were English, with a hyphen. You know, I don't know how you do that um, in Chinese and Japanese, but because he uses a mix of those characters, but uh, it's one for him, this one thing. So, you know, he's got this continuous, the circle of the way from aspiration to practice to enlightenment, awakening to nirvana, uh, is there's not the slightest gap. That's how he puts it. Continuous practice is the circle of the way. So every single person here is not just doing that, but, part of it, caught up in it, supporting it, sustaining it. There you go, all of that out of a couple of key clicks. So let's see. Are you there, Dan?
Yep, we're here.
Okay. I think there's just one. Do you want to read one? Is that all you see?
I don't see it.
Okay.
I see other comments about other
Okay.
things in the
It
chat.
might have been one of those moments where you were, at least from my end, bumped off, or out of the meeting. So I'll read it. And this is a touching question, and really something for all of us in a way. But the question is, practice advice for working with not feeling well. How does one work with low-grade physical unwellness? And then there's a big thank you, expression of gratitude for this. So what first springs to mind, of course, is compassion. And we associate that with kindness, a kind of embrace, a suffering with, and all of that those are qualities of compassion. But this wisdom and compassion, this hand in hand of this practice of Shakyamuni Buddha's awakening of who we truly are. That's really not just kindness or succor, solace, comfort. It's at one mint, just one. This, well, Roshi calls it uncompromising oneness. It's what this world is. And even if we're challenged to really see that, sometimes more than others, perhaps, there's this quality of trust. This practice talks a lot about trust. I spoke about that a little this morning, about Mu, Ryon Roshi saying, you may not be able to see this yet, but trust it. And that is remarkable. To somehow we know this is true, that who I am is only a function of who everybody is and what everything is. There's no other way to move. I mean, this very breathing, this every characteristic of this is, of course, and we have beautiful scientific images for this, stardust and how every part of the body is coming, from billions of light years away, and how it, manifests and this comes together and falls apart. But this oneness, somehow it's a leap even beyond that. And we know it. It's what puts our feet on the path in some way. Yes, our suffering does that often, most commonly, but that can only come up in the context of somehow knowing just one existence. We might not name it that way, but this sense of separation isn't real, or we wouldn't suffer it. So, working with, you know, not feeling well, that's a tender context for practice, and just to come to that, like, well, like I mentioned, those key clicks where you just melt into it, where there's nothing outside it. So you can be invited to, there are ways of speaking about like not sticking to it. Um, hold on. Sorry. Let me see if I can get. I don't know what to do. Dan just texted me that he's been kicked off. Let's see. So sorry. Okay. So this is an invitation to, really empty our hands and be with things just as they are. So, nothing extra. I mean, I think every time I've been here, I've quoted these two lines. From the Song of the Grass Hut. Let go of hundreds of years and relax completely. Open your hands and walk innocent. So, what is that innocent for being ill? It's really to be exactly that. Nothing added. And of course, these just came to mind, these masters who I'm so fond of reading their teaching. Some of, this is from an era and a tradition where the depth and the power of this teaching just leaps off the page. I can hardly imagine. Well, it's all now. It really is. And so if reading, though, I mean, when I'm reading Unman, for example, his teaching, it's a translation, it's on the page, but he will lambast his monks. He's not the only one. One comes to mind. What are you doing looking to me for this? On and on and on. I mean, he's got one where he says, I only eat and shit, and here you are asking me about the ultimate meaning of who you are. He really off the rails. And then the last word is take care. So that teaching isn't just be kind to yourself, be cognizant of the situation. It's it's this absolutely being there with this. Um, Along with practice realization being one, practice awakening, one word, I would say giving and receiving is also like that. One giving, receiving. And your practice, not feeling well, low grade physical unwellness, that is being supported, in a limitless fashion. And you are supporting, you're actually sustaining. You could say the heavens and the earth, all of this. And again, if that starts to feel glorified at all, then there's no life in it. It's like the menu, not the feast. It's really on the ground, this innermost recesses of the house. So, Kanon, this figure, the Bodhisattva, the great Bodhisattva, teacher of all the Buddhas, Bodhisattva of great compassion. That's the kindred Bodhisattva to practicing with our ailments, all kinds of ailments, all kinds of brokenness. It can happen that the very wounds that we think limit us, in some cases defile us, we might think, are become, portals for really this boundless love. Become the very place of transmuting, of really seeing that. I also hear in this question, really like sit to sit, day to day. And I think what I'm saying does apply to that. Put that way, the most basic invitation would be moment to moment. Unman called that dust samadhi, or particle. If it's just now, nothing but now, then being tired, feeling weak, aching, it doesn't carry anything extra. It really is fairly light. So there's an invitation to very deep practice. At the same time, I would say, like, I feel like Henry's right here, whenever he talks about these 5 hindrances, which are really helpful to know and check for wherever your practice is. In fact, that when I read this question, I thought, well, that would be another thing to check for. But there, the third of the hindrances is sometimes called sloth and torpor in the old, but it's really sleepiness, right? Just, ugh. And he'll say, take a nap. So gauge yourself in the sense of freedom. It's not so helpful to be sitting and wondering, can I take this anymore? Should I stop now? It's just when the time comes, and practice and body, mind are going to be served best by lying down. Then lie down. And the clearer you get about that, the less sticky, the less dusty, the less of a screen to look through to get to that, the more freedom at just sort of doing the next thing, doing the fitting thing. And so when in this take care, I hear something very strong, and I also hear, you know, like the stream follows its way. Do that. Uh, yeah, these hindrances, I'll probably talk about a little more, but so they are, you know, our sense of craving. I want that desire. I want, need, aversion. I don't want. I don't. I feel like this, and I don't want to. Um, Craving. I wish things were other than they are. And then the third, the sleepiness, lack of energy. I mean, it's one way is to address that by resting, but you can also, if you really see that, suddenly it becomes vivified, and you can rest in it. You can really rest in being tired, and it's like you know getting somewhat oxygenated. I've heard someone describe it as kind of turning up the rheostat in terms of the brightness in your sitting. You're just there in it, nothing but that. And then comes restlessness. Um, and the last one is doubt. I think we all, they're familiar, but sometimes if sitting is involving some struggle, it's rather helpful to check, are one or more of those hindrances sort of going on right now? And very often, if you just see it, you can see through it. That. But there are also some approaches to dealing with them. Yeah. So, while I've been talking and talking, some more have come. I just want to say, heart goes out. Yeah. Let's see if I can get. The past few months, I've been having faint memories or feelings of transcendent experiences as a child, and feeling myself as part of everything. My current meditation practice seems to be stirring these feelings and memories. Curious of your thoughts on this. Well, yeah, beautiful. Um, and I think that's really so natural that we do have those feelings. Could say some people would describe them as these transcendent experiences, or, you know, Henry made the one sort of famous because he wrote about it so beautifully, his own, which was, he wasn't talking about a very hard childhood, but I think he was 19. But I remember those too, and uh, this practice is very often likened to kind of coming home to this, becoming a child of stillness, I've heard. Uh, this innocence, this completely unaffected, unguarded. Um, and our I think it's very natural to have those memories come up. In fact, this is a famous part of the Buddha's story, that he uh, finally left the palace and embarked on 6 years of the most austere asceticism, that he was, those austerities, he was about to die. And I was like, when one of the stories says he was, in the sutras, that he was got down to eating one sesame seed a day. He was just going to die. And in that weakness, he had a memory of a time when he was 6 years old, and he felt a deep sense of peace and oneness with all of the world, with all of nature, with the world. The story, he was at a festival and his nurse set him down under a tree, and one telling of that just is his memory of that wonder and peace. And that's what makes him begin to get in the river and bathe and accept this milk rice and find what we are calling the middle way, and then sit zazen, and the story, here we sit in that awakening. That's this. And so that memory from childhood is part of the fabric of what we're doing right now. Come home to it right now. It's not something to get back to. Okay. Thank you so much for your questions, and please feel free, if over the in the night or the course, any time in the course of this retreat, something comes up, just feel free to pop it into the chat, and I'll perhaps have something to say even if there isn't a question, and if not, we'll sit. So that's what we're going to do now. If let's see, Dan, are you here now? Okay. I will, I don't have my beautiful big bell right by me, but why don't we stand up for 4 minutes, take a 4-minute break, and we'll sit again at 3 o'clock Mountain Time, and I'll have a bell by then. Okay, thank you all so much.